The most emphatic hammering of the League Two season so far was delivered at Gresty Road, more commonly known, of course, as the Alexandra Stadium, because Chesterfield ran out 5-0 winners at Crewe. Alexandra producing a real statement of their promotion credentials, leaving the Alex bottom of the embryonic League Two table. Very early days, of course. I think whenever there's a result like this, the big question is how much of it was Team A being amazing and blowing the team apart, and how much of it was Team B letting them do that. And that's really what I'm going to try and decipher and dissect in this match podcast. So I think for me, there are slightly more teams who would have played this Crewe Alexandra performance, if you like, and won 5-0 than there are teams who would have played this Chesterfield side and lost 5-0. And I think if you had to ask me to put a percentage on it, I would say it was 40% Chesterfield brilliance, and they were brilliant, absolutely no question about it. Tom Naylor at the back, the front four of Dylan Markande, Armando Dobra, James Berry and Will Grigg all rotated and interchanged seamlessly, and they were so exciting to watch. And Ollie Banks spraying his diagonals like we know he can do. This really was a fine Chesterfield performance. At the same time, I think there was a large degree to which Crewe Alexandra left the door open for them to do that. And that's where I'd really like to focus without taking anything away at all from Chesterfield, who were outstanding. But I would like to lead with Crewe because I think there's a lot of problems that's really important to dissect. Owner Charles Grant, I think, had said in the local media that they could only have room in the budget to sign one more player, and that does look quite worrying on this evidence, because I think what you want to go into a season with, especially in the early games, is a spine of the team that you can be really confident in and happy with, and I don't see that at Crewe Alexandra. Partly because Tom Booth, the goalkeeper, is injured, although Philip Marshall actually did make a few saves in this game as well as conceding 5. But I would expect Tom Booth to come back in when he's fit. The big problem for me for Crewe Alexandra, it's up top, and I think I put out a TikTok for those of you who are on there when they signed Kane Hemmings and Omar Bogle. It was one of those signings. And I expressed the concern that Crewe weren't replacing Elliot Nevitt, and I do kind of question when a team has the same manager and ostensibly the same idea or strategy, when they lose a key player and don't replace them in style, if you like. So, you know, Crewe Alexandra not getting was it 17 goals Elliot Nevitt scored last season? Might have been more. You know, understandable. You're not necessarily going to get your striker getting around 20 goals again next season. I totally understand that. But what you want to look for in any club is a kind of joined up recruitment process where, you know, you bring in someone who's going to bring similar qualities. And I don't think Kane Hemmings nor Omar Bogle, who's actually injured at the moment, and that's probably another factor that we can come on to. I don't think either of them are likely to replace Elliot Nevitt, because what you got from Elliot Nevitt is this raw persistence, the way he hassled and harried defences. He came to Tranmere a few years ago from Warrington Rylands, 1906, I think it was. I think it might have been set 4 of non-league football, and I think he had this kind of raw appreciation for playing in the Football League and wanted to. He felt like he was playing like he wanted to maximise every moment with the way he was constantly putting pressure on defences. I don't really see that with Kane Hemmings nor Omar Bogle for that matter. And that brings me to 2 question marks. If Crewe Alexandra felt they didn't need to replace Elliot Nevitt and the qualities that he provided, that's a bit of a worry. Conversely, it's a bit of a worry if the recruitment team, if Lee Bell, looked at Kane Hemmings and looked at Omar Bogle and thought, either of them can replace the qualities provided by Elliot Nevitt. Because for me, when I've looked at Kane Hemmings previously in his career, I actually don't mind him at this level. I think he's got good hold-up play. I think actually, if you give the ball to him short, to his feet, I actually think he's not bad hold-up striker in terms of link play. If you give it to his feet, not necessarily in the air. I think he's okay in the air, but not really a target man. And I think maybe in the right system with the right amount of creativity, he can score 10 to 15 goals. Although you might have to work with me on that statement, given the sort of the one that he missed in the second half. But he's certainly not really going to replace Elliot Nevitt and the qualities and the sort of running power that he provided. And that's immediately, straight away, a bit of a concern for me. And I almost wonder if you're asking Kane Hemmings to do what Elliot Nevitt did without having the same skill set. Because for me, I think what Kane Hemmings can do is he can put a little bit of mild pressure on the defence. If you look at Curry's, Elliot Nevitt's, if you use a Curry analogy, Elliot Nevitt's a Jalfrezi. Kane Hemmings is kind of a Korma, if you like. He'll show to put a bit of pressure on defence without really, and you never really feel like he's going to maximise that sort of pressure. It's like he's kind of looks like he's putting a bit of pressure on, but you never feel like he's really going to steal the ball or run beyond. And that's fair. That's not an insult to Kane Hemmings. It's just he's a completely different type of striker, I think. And so there's kind of a bit of a question mark for me about whether he's being used correctly or whether he's being asked to replace Elliot Nevitt's qualities, or as I say, if you're thinking we don't need to replace Elliot Nevitt, then that's a bit of a concern for me as well. And then I think the other concern for me was the midfield. Now, I think with Connor Thomas and Max Sanders, I actually thought they were putting in the effort this afternoon. I think possibly there's an extent to which Ryan Cooney and Zach Williams being so weak defensively as fullbacks or right wing back and left centre back, if you want to go to when they made the in half alterations, because they were so weak in those wide areas. Maybe there was an extent to which Connor Thomas and Max Sanders had to do so much running and had to kind of cover so many bases that it actually compromised the midfield shape. So maybe with better defending out wide, Connor Thomas and Max Sanders might find it easier to keep the midfield shape and keep a lid on things a little bit more. At the same time, I also felt like Crewe were missing a bit of physicality, someone who can bring a bit of steel to that midfield, who can kind of shore things up, who can kind of provide that bit of experience, that bit of nous. Maybe Connor Thomas, was supposed to kind of provide that, but I felt that was missing. It felt like the midfield was just blown wide open. And I think even if your fullbacks are losing their 1v1 duels, I think as a team, you've kind of got to trust your teammates to do their job. And that might be difficult because you might not entirely trust them to do their job. But I also feel like for a team to function, if you're a player that's trying to do multiple jobs at once, it can all become a bit chaotic. And that's where Chesterfield, I think, exposed it entirely. But I thought there were some question marks in midfield. And then in defence, I think because of those issues in the full-back or wing-back or wide centre-back areas, Mickey Demetriou, he dropped off a little bit, you could argue, in the second half of last season. And you do worry about a bit of a hangover from that, because I thought he wasn't given much great protection, to be fair. Sometimes he was drawn out into those wide areas in the left channel, and that's never really going to be his game. But at the same time, you also feel like, is he that imposing presence that we've maybe associated with Mickey Demetriou previously? And Conor O'Riordan, who they lost in January, I still don't think they've filled that void. James Connolly, who they brought in this summer, he was never really going to be a Conor O'Riordan replacement, because he's about 5-6 inches shorter, and he's just not as imposing a figure. And I think it's fair to say James Connolly didn't have his best game either. And listen, nobody really did they? Let's be honest. I think you're looking at a striker that can't really press and put much pressure on opposing defence. You've got a midfield that's arguably lacking a little bit of steel, but I'm going to give some mitigation for that. You've got fullbacks who, or players in wide defensive situations, who you might question them from an effort point of view, and certainly from a engagement point of view, and really firmly defending that flank. And then you've got question marks over whether Crewe have got that assured defensive presence. And then you've got a goalkeeper who maybe had question marks over him at MK Dons. Actually, I probably wouldn't apply too much blame to the goalkeeper, even though Crewe have conceded 5, which sort of sums it all up, really. But I think an eclectic, toxic mix of problems at Crewe, and it makes me kind of wonder that, with only one more player to bring in, supposedly, I would hope, if I'm in Lee Bell's shoes, that there is a bit more room in the budget, because I think at this rate Crewe are going to need a bit more in terms of being able to bring players in at this rate, because it does seem quite worrying. But I think I have to give so much credit to Chesterfield. I thought they exposed the problems that I've spoken about with Crewe really ruthlessly. And the big one I've got to come on to is Tom Naylor, because I was expecting him to play in midfield, actually, but he was outstanding at centre half, not just because he got in at the near post and scored 2 nice headers, but also his passing was absolutely outstanding, which I suppose you'd expect from a midfielder playing in central defence, because the way he progressed those passes, we're not necessarily talking diagonals, but those sort of incisive passes that were sort of down the flank, if you like, that just opened things up, the kind of vertical passes, just had a bit of a bit of spice on. I don't even know, can't quite find the word for it, but they had something lovely. They had something great about them, some of his passes. So I really liked those passes from Tom Naylor on that sort of right channel. Talking of that right channel, I thought Dylan Marcando on his debut was outstanding in the way that he linked up with Vontae Daly Campbell, and that's starting to look like a really strong right-sided pairing for the Spirates, even though both are new players. But the way Dylan Marcando cut inside, and you know what, Marcando came with great reviews from Tottenham. He had a great reputation at youth level, and it's taken it some time for him to translate that great youth reputation into senior football, because sometimes I feel like young players can start at a really high level, but actually, the highest level of youth football versus, the top 2 divisions of English football, it is still a massive jump. And I do feel like sometimes even players with a really good youth reputation can do with starting themselves at a lower level and building their careers gradually. And so it's probably no surprise that Dylan Marcando's quality is starting to show already at this level. And I love the way that he cuts inside and played, I think it was the 3rd goal where he cut inside from the right and played that lovely ball for Will Grigg, who put it across and Berry tucked it in at the back stick. And again, Grigg, I think, is worth mentioning, because you know what, and maybe I have to take some responsibility for this. When you think of a 33-year-old centre forward that's been a poacher in their career, it comes up with certain assumptions, perhaps, where, are they going to be a bit mobile? Are they going to be a bit like waiting for chances to come for them in the box? And probably I should have anticipated this a bit more, that Grigg's all-round game this afternoon was outstanding in terms of his movement. He looked so sharp. He looked so lively. He certainly didn't look like he was 33. And I think that was crucial to the way Chesterfield were able to cut Crewe open at will. So all credit to Will Grigg. It's difficult sometimes when you're such a prolific centre-forward to have that presence of mind, that selflessness to create for others, as opposed to snuffing out chances for yourself. So I have to pay testament to his performance. James Berry, by the way, such an instinctive first-time finish for his first goal, where it was literally, I think it was James Connolly overplaying at the back, and it was literally the ball. I'm saying literally a bit now. The ball just came to him, literally. The ball just came to him, and he had a shot first time, and I don't know how much he could have been expecting it, but it suggests a player that's playing with a lot of confidence. And I think with Ryan Colcliffe out injured at the moment, and possibly one or two others in attacking positions, this was a real opportunity for James Berry, and he's taken it with both hands. He's been on some journey right up from the lower echelons of non-league football, and it's great to see him grabbing his chance in the EFL with 2 goals today. So fantastic strike for his first goal, and chipping in with 2 is really impressive. And then Armando Dobra, who again, like the way he jinks in and out, the way he looks so incisive, so creative in those advanced. It just looks at home in those advanced areas, doesn't he? And I can easily see him being one of Chesterfield's best players again this year. And I think he can really cause havoc in that number 10 position. But I'm sure he's going to be comfortable and confident drifting out into wide areas and dovetailing with some of those wide players and Will Grigg. So yeah, Armando Dobra was outstanding, and he took that 5th goal really well, didn't he? And I think where I'm going to, Chesterfield were outstanding this afternoon, and I think it's really important to give them full credit. I'm going to hold something a little bit back in terms of my assessment of where Chesterfield are at, partly because it is so early in the season and so much can change. But I look at that midfield pairing of Darren Oldacre and Ollie Banks, and I think incredible from a technical point of view. And some of Ollie Banks's diagonal balls, the way he sprays it about, the way he really controls games in possession, really outstanding. And I'm so pleased for it, because Ollie Banks has always deserved to be one of the best players in League Two, and sometimes he's not necessarily played in teams that have in his career. If I think of who Ollie Banks has played for in his career, has he ever played for a top League Two side? Off the top of my head, I would say maybe no. I think that he's often been in maybe struggling sides, and I think that that's meant that it's maybe been hard for him to stand out in the same way. So yeah, it was a joy to watch Ollie Banks, and it felt like watching a sort of League Two, scaled down League Two version of Paul Scholes this afternoon. So he was phenomenal with his diagonals. At the same time, there's part of me, and Chesterfield fans, feel free to correct me in the comments if I'm a little bit misguided on this. I remember talking to a Barrow fan about Ollie Banks, and this is going back a couple of years now, saying that maybe there was a mobility issue with turnovers in midfield, that you've kind of got to balance that with someone who's really tenacious in midfield. And I don't know. And again, like I say, Chesterfield fans, correct me in the comments. I wouldn't necessarily associate Darren Oldacre with being super tenacious. In fact, when he was at Gillingham, I don't know whether he's a different player now, because I've not studied the National League so much. At Gillingham, he was this really high potential technical talent that maybe you might question from an application point of view from time to time. I'm sure if he's playing and starting for Paul Cook, that's less in question now. But certainly from a point of view of who's your destroyer in midfield alongside Ollie Banks, who's your athletic anchor man that's going to break up play and allow Ollie Banks to dictate in possession, I'm not sure I necessarily see that. I don't think that mattered today because of how poor Crewe were, but it's something I am going to kind of raise in terms of future games. And Tom Naylor was so outstanding as a centre back. I almost want, it was 10 out of 10 today, so I almost wouldn't want to move him away from his centre back position. But I almost think there'll be certain games where Ollie Banks, if he starts in central midfield, might need some more of a Tom Naylor in midfield than a Darren Oldacre. And I think because Crewe was so disorganised, so chaotic, so not having a real identity that's coherent, that it didn't really, you could get away with having 2 more technical based players in central midfield, and then you'd still be able to serve the attacking quartet with a really high volume and not get caught on the counter attack, or at least not until it was, the last 10 minutes of the game type thing, and you're already 5-0 up. So that's kind of one dilemma that I think Paul Cook's got to manage. But what I would say is, I think he managed that quite well by going to a back 3. I think it might have been some point in midway through the second half when he actually put, now what was it? I think it was a back 3 of, was it Che Dunkley, Henrique Araujo, and one other centre back, I'm pretty sure. that was playing in terms of that back three. Yeah, Che Dunkley, yeah, might be Naylor. Yeah, Naylor was still there. Che Dunkley, Tom Naylor, and possibly Henrique Arajo on the left of the back three. And Arajo made some good overlapping runs. He looked to me like a bit of a specialist overlapping centre back as well, which looks pretty funky, given that I've always associated Paul Cook with being a 4-2-3-1 man, but if he's got that tactical flexibility, then that will help. And maybe having a back three will help them manage games and mitigate counter-attacking opportunities when they do have that midfield two of Banks and Oldacre. Now, that's not to say that it was a problem today, because, as I say, Chesterfield were outstanding and Crewe just didn't really expose that possible vulnerability. But it's something that I'm just going to be aware of. And I think we're going to find out, as much as Chesterfield were outstanding, I'd still like to see if they can get Harry Tyra back on loan from Everton. I know Paul Cook praised Fulham as a club, as a sort of parent club to deal with, and I almost wonder if there's an implicit criticism of Everton there in terms of how difficult they've been in terms of getting Harry Tyra back. I don't know if that's true or not, just sort of seemed plausible. Yeah, so I think with Chesterfield, what I'm really curious about is, it's one thing to obliterate an awful Crewe Alexandra side, which they did expertly, and that attacking quartet rotated so well, and the relationship between Markande and Vontae Daly-Campbell, and they were outstanding and so crisp and accomplished, and tore them apart at will, and almost even 5-0 up. They had 4-0 up in the first half. They had a few 3v3s that, if they'd exploited, they could have even scored another couple of goals. That's how dominant they were, really. But yeah, in terms of their fixtures, I'm curious, because they've got coming up Gillingham away on the 31st of August. They've got Port Vale away on the 14th of September, and they've got Doncaster away on the 28th of September. 28th of September. So I do feel that by the end of September, I'd really like to see whether they can translate elements of the performance that we've seen this afternoon into some of those big games. I'm not expecting them to win 5-0 and be as dominant as they were, but I'd be really curious to see how much of today's performance they can translate into those big games. But you can only beat what's in front of you. What's in front of them was really poor, and I think there's a lot of questions for Crewe to address on and off the field, and I think hopefully some answers are going to be provided at the fans forum this week. But for Chesterfield, they were outstanding and put forward a real statement of their ambitions.